Imagine if each morning when you wake up, you're smiling and looking forward to your day, knowing you are happy even while you're dealing with grief and loss. The Grief and Happiness podcast inspires, comforts, and supports you with each new episode. I'm Emily Threat, welcoming you to explore with me your life of endless possibilities. Aloha. I'm so glad you're all joining us here today, and we have a very special guest from Bali. I'm very excited about that. I love Bali. It's a beautiful place. It was a great place that I went as kind of part of my healing after the second husband that I had die. I wanted to go someplace new and do something different and see something beautiful, and I certainly discovered that in Bali. It was absolutely fabulous, and I highly recommend it. So, Chris, and I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your last name.
Cirak.
Oh, I would have said it wrong. So Chris Cirak is here.
Well, there is no right or wrong, but yes.
Okay. I like that. He's a wonderful person, has a great book called Be You. And I invited him in particular because a lot of people, when they're dealing with grief, kind of forget who you is. And I thought we could have an interesting conversation. So, hi, Chris.
Hi, Emily. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you. Can you tell everybody a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a lot to tell, and I think I'm not unique in that way. I think everyone has an incredible story and a timeline and an unfolding of their hero's journey. And in my case, I grew up pretty much a military brat and just moving around a lot, which was my early challenge, is to work through the rootlessness. But later on, I realized that also provided me with perspective. I was never too indoctrinated into one way of thinking, one way of living. And then ultimately, that made me who I am. So there's nothing ever to be regretted. And I had a 25 plus career in design and psychology and tech and multimedia and startup world and teaching in higher education. And that all led me one day through my journaling, to realize that all of this, my own voice was emerging from these experiences, including, loss and grief and, some of the things we'll talk about today. And realizing that everything is a reflection of who we are and what we need to look at within ourselves to become bigger and better persons and the person we're meant to be.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I love how you said that you discovered things through your journaling, because that was exactly what happened with me. I've been a journaler for years, and I found after my second husband that died was gone that I was spending a lot of time with my journal, and I was just amazed at what was coming out and what happened because of what I was journaling, where if I would have just been sitting there thinking about it, I'm not sure it would have all come to be.
Yeah, that's exactly the value of journaling, but also speaking. So when we're just in our heads and thoughts tend to just fly around, I like to do an exercise with my students that within seconds, it's a breath exercise. Within seconds, you get to see just how much of a monkey mind we have, and it jumps around from branch to branch and past to future and topic to topic and taking you down rabbit holes. And so nothing really ever becomes concrete. But once we write things down, things really crystallize, or even just speaking them out, they crystallize. So yeah, there's great value in that.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. And a lot of times people who are dealing with grief, especially in early grief, aren't talking a whole lot. There's not a lot of people around that they get to talk to. So the journal is really, I think, essential at that point.
Yeah. And it's energy, right? So we need to release and get that energy moving and get it out of us. And so if we're just holding it in, it doesn't bode too well.
That's true. Would you be able to share that exercise that you mentioned with us?
Yeah, absolutely. We can do it on air. It's very simple. So if you can just sit into a relaxed pose, and with our eyes and mouth closed, we're going to focus on the incoming and outgoing breath at the entrance of our nostrils. Just simply observe your breath as it is. And if you have trouble locating your breath, you can breathe slightly harder once or twice, and then return to natural breath, normal breath. And let's do this for 20 seconds. Slowly open our eyes. Especially if this is the first time doing this, one will have noticed that within seconds, thoughts appear and pull our attention away. And it can be frustrating at first to realize that we can't even keep our focus on something as basic as our breath for more than a few seconds before that monkey mind sets in and takes us on other roads. And so that's really what we've been working with most of our lives is this mind that jumps around a lot, that's untamed because we don't exercise it. It's an awareness muscle of being aware of your thoughts. We're not our thoughts. So we tend to become conditioned to believe our thoughts, to identify with our thoughts. And then ultimately the mind has this power over us. And if we use the mind, which is a tool designed to know things. And the future is the great unknown, right? So if we try to navigate life go out into this future of the unknown, then we're working with a tool that is always frantically trying to fill the unknown with something it knows. And most of the time, as we realize, this can just be pure fabrication, projection, but that's just what it does. And so my practice is, and this applies to grief in a very big way, is to come out of that headspace where we're so identified with our thoughts and the stories and the traumas that are associated with them, and bring our attention, find our groundedness within our body. And this simple breath exercise is really just returning to the breath. Is such a beautiful tool because it's one of the few things that we have control over, but it can also work autonomously. So it's just a beautiful tool to use and try to regulate. There's lots of research for those who are interested on how it regulates blood pressure and well-being overall, and ultimately feeling your body, your breath, your body, your sensations. It brings you into the present moment, and the present moment is typically so simple and so small, if you will. There's not enough room for anxiety and fear. A lot of that is just projections by the mind. So working with the breath, working with body scanning, which I teach at my retreats and also in one-on-one sessions, that helps us find our grounding in our body, in the present moment. And there we can then really work through some of these overwhelming feelings that are only overwhelming when we're really in our head, where there's this endless canvas of amplifying our feelings.
Wow. It's so true. I've done lots of breathing things over the years, and it's so wonderful to be able to get centered and kind of allow everything else to fall away so that you can focus on the moment.
Yeah. There's lots of things, like even just taking your socks off and standing, in grass. Again, there's an immediate response to Mother Earth. And again, people who are into research can look up how all the different particles get activated inside of us, and as soon as we just touch the earth, touch ground. So really connecting back to who we really are, feeling our feelings as they are without exaggerating them, without lingering on them, and kind of expanding what has happened beyond the actual event. So that really brings us back to a place of simplicity and connectedness to ourselves, to others. A lot of this mental lens leads to judging and defining and labeling, all of which ultimately creates a sense of separateness between us and the people, places, and things that we judge and label and define. And that ultimately leads to feeling, small and lonely in this big, scary world, as opposed to really seeing things as they are, experiencing, as I call it. And that then reduces the distance. It pulls you in. It's non-reactive energy. It's inclusive energy. It's a caring and loving and compassionate and empathic energy, and being interested in what the moment brings, having a beginner's mindset, curiosity of to see what the next moment brings, and there's a magic that unfolds from there.
I love that being able to allow ourselves to experience that magic is quite wonderful. And I love what you said about you having your feet in the grass. Before I moved to Maui, I've been here about 7 years now, and I used to have all kinds of foot problems. Going to the podiatrist, all kinds of things, and had problems getting shoes that fit right and that I was comfortable in. And once I got to Maui, I really hardly have any shoes anymore because I'm always barefoot. I'm always, outside whenever I can be outside. And the change has been remarkable. I have no pain in my feet. Right now I do because I had a foot surgery, but generally I have no pain in my feet, which is a miracle for me after all those years of foot problems. And it was so natural as just taking off my shoes and getting outside and feeling the grass up between your toes. And it's fabulous.
Yeah. And that's a great example of the things that these are all signs, and we have to listen to them. And so all that foot pain led you to a more grounded existence, if I can call it that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so all the things that happen to us that when we say, why me? Why did this happen? And so forth, rather than being so much in resistance and wanting it to be different, because we get stuck in this wanting what has already happened to be different, which is kind of futile in and of itself, but to see the lesson in it, to look for where is it pointing me, or more importantly, where is it pointing to within us? Because we wouldn't feel triggered if there wasn't something inside of us that needed attention. And usually it's love and care and self-knowing, self-loving that we're being called to do.
It's true. I was just thinking about being in Bali was such a beautiful experience for me. The people were so different than anything you experience in the U.S. at all. There seems like everybody's kind. Everybody seems spiritual. You have the beautiful offerings that they put out with the incense in front of the doors every place every morning, and you just. Well, grounded is the word that comes to me. You kind of I felt grounded there. It wasn't it was very easy to be in the moment while I was there.
Yeah, that does sound very similar to where I am in Bali, and the offerings and the kind of coming out of yourself, right? To honor a greater power, a greater existence beyond yourself, and that just makes for a groundedness in our spiritual being. And some cultures, especially island states, I think they have a lot of that happening. And somewhere in our journeys through the twists and turns of life, everyone should give it a shot to venture out there and experience that.
Yeah, it's really. I think it's an amazing experience to be able to get someplace different, look at things through different eyes. We get so used to how things have always been, especially if you've lived in the same place always or same area. You see the same people every day, do the same things every day, and by being able to see how other people live and experience life is really miraculous in a lot of ways.
Yeah. It opens us up in so many different levels. And, it's our resistance to change that often prevents us from leaving our comfort zones. But it's kind of a futile attempt, because change will come to our doorstep if we don't actively seek it. So we may as well actively seek it, because that's what will grow us, in reasonable quantities, one at a time. But certainly that's our purpose ultimately is to keep expanding. And because we we discover ourselves through these new experiences. We're responding to them from a place of who am I, and it reveals parts of ourselves that we didn't know before, pretty and ugly, whatever they may be, and pleasant or unpleasant. But through that, we become less stuck. We become more conscious, more self-aware of ourselves and others. And ultimately, awareness is the type of energy and frequency we want to be living in, and that we want to be contributing back to the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's so beautiful. I think it's so important to just pay attention. And I know I spent most of my life in, like with the things they put on the horses so that they can't see either way.
Blinders, yeah.
Blinders, yeah. With blinders on, because I was doing what I thought I had to do, and when I had to do it, and how I thought I was supposed to do it, and didn't see that there were the world beyond that and life beyond that. And when I with my husband Ron, he taught me very much about living in the moment, which something I really hadn't considered before. I thought I was, but when you actually do live in the moment and just pay attention to right now, because it really is all we really have is right now, then you can make right now pretty wonderful wherever you are, whatever's going on. Yeah. You can choose to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that requires an openness, and you mentioned paying attention earlier. And that's really a key to, instead of being so self-absorbed, we're really looking at the detail and the novelty of each situation and what it's saying. And in this detail, in this paying attention, we stay out of this mental labeling of things, this taking a snapshot and then living through that snapshot of a person or a place, and then being upset when it changes. But rather, we're staying connected to the freshness of each moment. A simple exercise to do with if you've been in a relationship for a very long time, or you've had a favorite art piece sitting there that you've just grown so accustomed to that you hardly see it anymore, right? You just walk right past it. And one time it was so fresh and exciting, and is to literally notice the detail. Really look at something that you haven't looked at before. If it's a person, look at their eyebrow or their earlobe, or if it's your favorite artwork, is just lean in closer, notice the frame or whatever it may be. And that breaks through this kind of mental snapshot that ultimately leads to it fading, our experience with the newness fading. And it brings us back into the present moment with what is right in front of us, which is always alive. It's always evolving and changing and fresh and new. We just have to get into the habit of staying present with it.
Yeah, and it's amazing what you can see when you do something like that. I recalled when you were saying that about the first time I went to an art museum where there was a painting by Van Gogh that I'd seen in books and pictures always, but I'd never seen one in person. And I was blown away. It looked so different, and it was so spectacular. And I thought, well, now I see why everybody thinks he's such a big deal, because he really is, because this is just absolutely amazing. And when you flatten it out with a photograph, you just don't get that same sense. So when you really do start paying attention to what things look like, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And I think we've all had that type of experience where maybe it's a book or a movie, some experience that a few years later, maybe we revisit it and or experience it again, and we see it with different eyes, and we have a new experience of it. And well, that's usually because we've changed and we've evolved. So we keep seeing things as a reflection of who we are. And if we really stay present with things, then everything keeps evolving. Everything keeps staying fresh. We don't have to wait years and years when we've obviously shifted. but rather that we stay in that flow of the our awareness of a ever changing, ever unfolding life, and then everything pretty much stays fresh and magical because it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. You don't have to. One thing that just amazes me is when people tell me they're bored, because I don't understand the concept of boredom at all. I think it's a choice that you make to be bored. I live where I live in Maui. I'm up on the side of a volcano, and so I've got a kind of an extensive view, and I have a yard that's got all kinds of beautiful things growing in it. And every time I go outside, and I love to go out and sit outside, I actually take my computer out there and call it my office. That I'd rather work out there when I'm doing my writing and things, because everything is different every time I go out there. I see different things, and it's beautiful, and I get to taste different things. You walk through, and we have things growing in the garden, and there's a gorgeous flower that we have here that looks kind of like a wax pine cone, where the ends tip over a little bit, but it's got these little tiny, not tiny, but these yellow like blossoms that stick out at different points on it, that just a few of them on there. And I was out there the other day with a friend of mine, and she said, you can eat those. And I said, no. She said, yeah, I tried. Just the yellow part, not the waxy looking big red thing. And it was so sweet and unique. I can't even compare it to anything else except for saying that it was sweet. And I thought, I'm so glad that she told me that so I could have that experience, because I would never have experienced that flavor any other way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the diversity of nature is just mind-boggling altogether, above the sea. But I'm just getting into diving here, and what's
Ooh.
below the water is just, I mean, that's a whole nother world down there. That everything you think is just, if something's just a rock, it's some creature or some coral alive thing. And so yeah, and I mean, that's our key to, we are an expression of that nature just as much. And talk about amazing, diverse, complex creatures, getting to know ourselves in midst of this incredible diversity and beauty is really, that's what we're here for.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all an experience. And if we can live that experience. And with grief, I know a lot of times people kind of shut down, and they'll just sit and not go any place or do anything, or they'll lie in bed or lie on the couch or sit on the couch and aren't really moving. And generally, when they get to the point where they can start moving, what I always tell them to do is go outside, just breathe the fresh air outside. And the more often you go out, the further you're going to go out, the more you're going to see, the more experience you're going to have. And it helps bring you back alive in a way that you won't be if you stay in the staleness of the same position and the same air breathing all the time.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. And I tell my meditator groups all the time, it's you have to balance out the sitting with movement. Ultimately, you can sit and kind of like break up the stuck energy, but it won't really leave you until you start moving. So movement is so important. Like you said, it dovetails into what we were talking about a moment ago, is how you then get out of your head, where a lot of these looping thoughts exist, and the stories that we tell ourselves, and you connect with the simplicity and detail of nature out there, and let it lead you to the next thing and the next thing, and take a few more steps, and you can come out of whatever mood you're in, where you're feeling stuck. And very simply, nature walks. My mom she's 82, had a triple bypass a few years ago, and that's one of her main remedies, is really to do nature walks, to go be with the trees, because nature is healing, it's loving, it kind of reaches out to you when you're out there, and kind of entangles you in it, and it's a beautiful planet ultimately.
Yeah. It really is. When my husband had his open heart surgery, and they told him to go for walks when he got home, and we'd never really gone for walks before. He just didn't want to take the time to do it, and we started just walking in our neighborhood, which was actually quite lovely with lots of flowers, and there were lots of roses growing in the yards in our neighborhood. And he literally would go up and smell the roses. He took time to smell the roses because he was just so excited that he could. He said, I didn't realize what I was missing before when I wasn't allowing myself to do this. Mm-hmm. But once I could, they just smell so fantastic that you could just see him light up in a way that he hadn't in years, because he was too busy working and being himself. And he had fun and things too, but he just had missed out on that part of his life, and he made up for it by allowing himself to enjoy it.
Yeah. All these things point us to where we should be going, right? And most of the time, we're not actually on our path, not on the ideal kind of middle road. We tend to swerve and we get off the path, and then something happens that forces us to course correct. And then we move back onto a path, and maybe we veer the other direction. And so life is kind of, a journey of twists and turns. But ultimately, it's always pointing us back to balance, to self-love, self-knowing. And the more we take care of ourselves, the more we're then in a position to take care and love others.
That's right. Love is so incredibly important, and unconditional love. That was another thing that I learned, was loving unconditionally.
That little thing, yeah.
Yes, it's so amazing, because you think, sure, I love unconditionally, but when you really think about it, it's not really. So, but when you discover that you can and you do, it feels really good. I'm always telling people, they'll ask me about something, and they say, you had 2 husbands die. How can you be so happy? And I said, well, I'm actually happier now than I ever have been, because I've figured a lot of these things out, like unconditional love and going barefoot and living my life, enjoying taking deep breaths and relishing them.
Yeah. Yeah. When things happen that we didn't want to have happen, it deepens us, right? We may be in resistance first, and part of that resistance is the grief and the struggle through the feelings it brought up, but ultimately surrendering to the situation and letting go of those feelings again. And that's what deepens us, and that's what makes us a better, a bigger, and a deeper person. And so all these things happen for a reason. Yeah, everything does.
It sure does. Well, I have loved this conversation. I feel like I'm all smiley through this whole thing. It feels really good. I like talking to you because you're smiling too, and it feels good. And it's important to put yourself around pleasant people. That makes a big difference too. If you can smile together, that really helps. And
yes.
This has been a beautiful conversation, and I'm sure that our listeners are going to want to know more about you and what you do, and we'll have that in our links under the recording, including Be You, his beautiful book that he wrote that gives you a lot to think about. So thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you, Emily. It's been a great, great pleasure.
Oh, thank you. And I'll see our guests again next time. And so happy that you're listening to us. Aloha. Do you want more comfort, support, and happiness? Join the Grief and Happiness Alliance. Visit my website at lovingandlivingyourwaythroughgrief.com and read my book, Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, rate it, review it, and binge on all our episodes on grief and happiness. I can't wait to welcome you back to another episode